Okay. Okay, great. Good evening. I'm Eric Feldman, and I am an associate principal at RHI. We're the lead consultant for the Sustainable Brentwood Plan. I'm joined here today by my colleague, Eden Marek, also from RHI, and also with us is Brian Creamer, who's Deputy Director of Resilience Planning and Design at Niche Engineering, who've been our partners on this effort, focusing primarily on flooding and stormwater management issues. And we're all delighted to be here today and to have reached this point in the process. Our goal for this session is to share the highlights of the draft Sustainable Brentwood Plan and the process leading up to this, and to receive your feedback to guide upcoming revisions to the document. Since we've shared the draft in advance and we're limited on time, we're going to keep the presentation at a somewhat high level without getting into a lot of the specifics. I'll also point out that the plan is not finalized yet. This is a touch point before we begin making revisions to and complete the document. And we'd welcome your feedback today, but we'll also accept written comments in the next week if you'd like to share them that way. Could go to the next slide. This is our agenda for the evening. We'll start with some background on the project. We'll briefly discuss the central challenge of addressing climate change in Brentwood and why this is important. We'll walk you through some of the highlights of the plan's overall structure and its goals and actions, and then discuss implementation of the plan. Next slide. As I think has been noted earlier, this process was funded and managed by Prince George's County Planning Department's Planning Assistance for Municipalities and Communities, or PAMC program. And the purpose of our work from the start was to create a climate action plan that adapts and builds on past and ongoing efforts, including the county's draft climate action plan and subsequent work, and incorporating ideas and input received during the planning process, along with the findings that have come from the Brentwood and North Brentwood flooding and stormwater hazard analysis. You'll see the timeline at the right. The process started a little over a year ago and included 2 meetings with a Sustainable Brentwood Advisory Committee, a public engagement effort that included 2 town events and an online survey. And we've also coordinated with the team preparing the flooding and stormwater analysis, which has happened in parallel. We also wanted to mention and extend a big thank you to some key advisors and collaborators, some of whom are on this call, during this process, including former council member Lauren Rauch, members of the advisory committee, and also the University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center, who have provided substantial assistance along the way. Next slide. Something we heard early on from both the town and the advisory committee is that equity needs to be the foundation of the plan and inform all goals and actions, and that equity should be a thread that runs through the whole plan. And this graphic shows some of the major impacts of climate change and how certain segments of the population are disproportionately impacted by climate change, whether it's due to housing insecurity, the ability to cover energy costs, transportation barriers, vulnerability to flooding and disruptions in services and storm events, or barriers engaging in public processes and accessing information. So this was a guiding principle that rose above all other principles. And on that note, go to the next slide. One of our first exercises with the advisory committee was to come up with guiding principles and goals for the plan. And shown here are the 5 guiding principles that came out of that process. The overarching goal is the carbon neutrality principle, which is achieving carbon neutrality by the year 2050 in alignment with both state and county goals. Another overarching principle is that the plan should address both mitigation, reducing Brentwood's contribution to climate change, and adaptation, responding to the impacts that are already occurring based on climate change. Another principle is that the plan should be actionable, identifying achievable and specific actions so that progress can be tracked over time. And at the same time, one other goal was to make the plan accessible and engaging and understandable to a range of audiences. And the hope was that this plan could hopefully encourage residents who have not previously engaged in climate action to try to make a difference with their own actions. And we'll talk about a little bit how we've tried to address that. And finally, and last but not least, we've seen already that Brentwood is a leader in terms of the number of things you're doing as a town through the Green Team and Sustainability Committee. And the hope is that this plan can build on that energy and expand the town's role as a local leader in climate action, which is more important than ever today. We can go to the next slide. Community input. To receive community input, our team set up a tent and exhibits at 2 town events, the Hispanic Heritage event, and then shortly after that, the International Day event. We also conducted an online survey to gather input from residents on their perspectives on climate change and particular concerns. Fortuitously, we also had the opportunity to learn from a parallel door-to-door survey on climate change that was being conducted by the University of Maryland students. This diagram here shows a simple way of showing some of the overlap between the results from the 2 surveys, as well as some unique takeaways that came out of both surveys. I won't go into all of the specific takeaways, but I will note that one big takeaway is that residents are indeed concerned about climate change and willing to adopt climate-friendly practices. There's also a very real concern about flooding and extreme weather, and also some concerns about barriers to climate action, such as energy costs and financial constraints, and the convenience of adopting more sustainable transportation choices. You can go to the next slide. And one more slide. I think we all know this, but it's worth highlighting again that climate change is already here. Significant floodings occurring not only in the town, as seen in this photo, but also increasingly throughout the county. We're also dealing with increasing levels of extreme heat, both in terms of the number of days and the duration of these events. And there are also other impacts of concern, including, but not limited to, drought, loss of native species, air quality. We can go to the next slide. And addressing climate change starts with addressing the root cause, which is greenhouse gas emissions, and understanding where these emissions are coming from. And on the left, these are results from the county's climate action plan. It's a community inventory of GHG emissions. And it shows that 50% of greenhouse gas emissions in the county are coming from transportation related or mobile sources, with another 45% from residential or commercial energy use. And on the right side, and I should say, we're very grateful to the Environmental Financial Center's support in preparing a municipal inventory for the town. looking at where GHG emissions generated by town facilities and operations are coming from. And in this case, the biggest contributors are electricity use, including emissions related to generating that electricity, and transportation and mobile sources, like maintenance equipment. I'll now turn it over to Brian, who will talk a little bit about the flooding and stormwater hazard component and how that's been integrated into the planning process.
Thanks, Eric. So I will be brief, but I wanted to make sure that everyone on the call and on the council understood that sort of parallel and tandem processes that were happening with the climate action plan, as well as the flooding and stormwater hazard and risk mitigation analysis that included a analysis of the drain and pipe network as well. So those two processes were happening in tandem. We want to make sure that the climate action plan was informed by and made salient the points and the findings from the flooding hazard analysis. The big picture is that Brentwood is faced with basically two types of flooding, right? Certainly riverine flooding, as well as flooding that can occur from rainfall that falls on Brentwood itself. And really key to what you're seeing on the map here, one of the findings from that assessment was that certain areas that basically the northern section of town near Allison Street, particularly close to the pump station, are vulnerable in the future condition to several feet of flooding. That is different than what the present day FEMA mapping shows. So this is much more detailed and nuanced mapping showing the extent and the depth of flooding risk that's present in certainly across Brentwood, but particularly in that area of Wyndham Road and Allison Street. Next. So certainly the flooding analysis highlights the risk and the potential flood exposure to several hundred properties, both commercial and residential, including the critical facility of the flood station itself. And the analysis had several recommendations, really important ones that we want to make sure that the council understands and are weaved and incorporated within the climate action planning document as well. That starts with remapping FEMA-based flow elevations and incorporating that new field survey data that you have to better understand the impacts and the potential risks, and an update of 100-year flood events. It also involves assessing pump capacity. Can't underline or underscore the significance and importance of those pump stations, both Allison Street and the one in North Brentwood. And working closely with the partners at PG County Department of Public Works and Transportation to make sure that the pump capacity assessment is, moved forward. And third, and I think also really importantly, is to make sure that the public is aware and the outreach and education around flooding risk is being communicated to residents and businesses. And we'll go through a few of the mitigation strategies at the tail end, at the end of the conversation tonight, about what businesses and residents can do to help mitigate their own risk.
Okay, and the Climate Action Plan's recommendations are all housed within the Goals and Actions chapter, chapter 4. And so I will give an overview of that chapter now. So this chapter contains 7 categories, which include buildings and land use, energy and utilities, transportation, green infrastructure and flooding, public health and safety, solid waste, and governance and public engagement. And across those 7 categories, there are 23 goals and 176 actions. And this may seem like a lot of actions, but the aim is to give as much step-by-step guidance as possible throughout the process. So that being said, we would like your input on the town's priorities, anything you feel is still missing from the plan, or even anything that you think should not be included. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go over the actions in detail in this presentation, but they are in the presentation appendix, so we can pull them up during discussion if that's needed and comes up. So each of the 7 categories include background information about how the topic is related to climate change and how that's showing up in Brentwood. Um, the action plan portion of each category is geared toward the town to help guide things like budget decisions. And that includes the vision, goals, and actions. But in addition to that, we included a section called What Can I Do? And it takes those ideas and sentiments and provides actions that residents and businesses can take themselves. And within that section, we also highlight actions that kids can take with their friends and family. And some other components we included are equity considerations and key term definitions. So 3 pieces of information that we include about each action in the implementation tables are estimated time frame, estimated action cost range, and action type. And we also include some other information in these tables, which you'll be able to see later on in the presentation. So most actions are recommended to start in some way in the next 5 to 6 years. Many actions span multiple time frame ranges or are ongoing. So this doesn't mean that all of these actions, need to be completed by 2030. It just means that in some way they would get started. The majority of use existing resources that the town has. So for example, town staff time, or would cost under $10,000 to implement. And most actions are geared toward public education. And you'll find throughout the plan that the town has a large role to play in keeping the public informed and engaged. So with that, I will get started with giving a very, very short overview of each category because we do want to make sure that we have time to discuss this as well at the end. So buildings and land use has a lot of overlap with energy and utilities, which is one of the other categories. So both should be considered together, but we'll start with buildings and land use. So some topics we considered within buildings and land use include building form and materials, development patterns, and land use. And you'll see some examples of these concepts in the photos on the right. So Bartlett Park in the top left corner is an example of green space as a land use in the town. And mixed food hall in the associated apartments in the bottom right corner is a great example of both an energy efficient building, denser development pattern with a mix of uses. The vision, goals, and actions within the action plan address things such as energy efficiency and working with the county to clear the way for green development, conservation, and infrastructure. And most of these actions are education related or in some way collaborative with the county. So energy and utilities, a lot of overlap with land use, buildings and land use. Again, we looked at areas like energy production and existing energy infrastructure, energy sources, and energy consumption. And the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions in the county come from energy use from transportation and from within buildings, as that was something that came up earlier. And so the vision, goals, and actions include helping to facilitate expansion of solar, voltaic, and resilient energy systems, achieving 100% clean and renewable energy, and minimizing energy use. And again, the majority of the actions are education related, but there are also more capital projects than in some of the other categories. Within transportation, some topics that were thought about were fuel types, single occupancy vehicle use, and the connectivity and accessibility of the transportation network for all types of travel. So cars, buses, bikes, scooters, pedestrians. And as you can see, transportation has a really significant impact on the town and the county's emissions. The vision, goals, and actions address facilitating the use of electric vehicles, reducing reliance on single occupancy vehicle use, and increasing the use of other modes of travel. And so there's more of an even division between these different action types, but about half are, or actually exactly half, are education related or are capital projects. And I'll hand things over to Brian briefly to speak about green infrastructure and flooding.
Thanks, Eden. So certainly, impervious surfaces and the extent of them are one of the major contributors to the extent of runoff and stormwater risk that faces Brentwood, particularly from roads and roofs, as well as the undersized pipes and closed drainage system that support the town. So green infrastructure solutions, like bioswales and the Bartlett Park example that the town I know is working through now, if not in the near future, will help to mitigate some of these risks. But certainly, we are. I hope it's no news to anyone, but we're certainly seeing more intense and more frequent rainfall. Not only are we seeing more rain annually, projected 5% increase for the county, but also more frequent intense rainfalls, right? A 70% increase is what is being projected, as well as an increase in the likelihood of a 10-year storm event happening. Next slide. So within the climate action plan, there are a series of tools that sort of take three different forms. One is about conveyance, right? So increasing the amount of inlets, increasing the inlet capacity, and making sure that culverts and elements that convey are appropriately sized to handle the amount of water that's falling. Stormwater mitigation strategies like retrofits such as bioretention planters or porous pavement can help capture and store water where as close to where it falls, mitigating the runoff in the first place. And then certainly building mitigation strategies like deployable barriers that you're seeing in the bottom there help in those larger storm events where flooding may impact private property. We want to make sure that those elements are protected in the event of the storm until stormwater recede. Thank you. Next slide. So the Climate Action Plan really enforces the theme of natural systems and built infrastructure working together to decrease the amount of stormwater runoff, to incorporate more infiltrative practices, so that we can adapt to our changing climate. All the goals and actions include a climate resilient stormwater management. They certainly expand on flood mitigation programs that exist, and about 30% of them include administrative action. Another 18% of them include education and engagement with residents and businesses. With that, I think I'm turning it back over to Eden for the last
one. All right. For public health and safety, this category focuses on topics like extreme heat, severe weather, of course, public health, and at-risk food systems. And one key area to look to address the effects of extreme heat is the lack of trees and green spaces along and east of Rhode Island Avenue. You can see how that lack of tree canopy in the left map corresponds to the hotspots in the map on the right. The vision goals and actions address urban heat island effect, improve various aspects of emergency response, and promote localized food systems. And again, as is the theme throughout most of this, most of the actions are aimed at education, engagement, and training. Solid waste really looked at two main areas, so waste reduction and diversion, and the town's role in making this change. And so it was estimated in a study done for the county's climate action plan that the majority of residential and commercial garbage as a whole could be diverted instead reused, recycled, and composted, 75% of it. So there is really a lot of potential there. The vision, goals, and actions address reducing waste production, increasing diversion efforts, and making the town events and activities greener. And so in addition to education, engagement, and training, many of the actions are actually administrative actions or capital projects. And finally, that brings us to governance and public engagement. There are three key considerations in order for the plan to be successful. Collaboration and management, education for residents, businesses, and town staff, and securing adequate funding. And the town has already done a lot in the works, or has a lot in the works that are great examples of these, as you can see on the screen. The Green Team and Tree Committee are doing great things, community events, projects. So our recommendations really just build on the work that's already happening. The vision, goals, and actions address effective management, as well as expanding public education and assistance, and pursuing funding opportunities. And that's really directly reflected in the majority of the actions falling into education and administrative action categories. And I will turn it back over to Eric. Eric, you are muted.
Can't tell you how many times that happens to me. Before we conclude, I'll just talk briefly about implementation. The plan includes an implementation matrix to aid in tracking and prioritizing recommended actions. And this graphic shows the components of the matrix, which include the time frame for implementation, short-term, medium-term, long-term, or in many cases straddling more than one time period, the general cost level, and responsible parties. And this is one area where we would really value your input, not only helping to identify our responsible parties, which can happen offline, I believe, but also general input on whether the actions proposed and the proposed timeframes make sense to you from the town's perspective. Next slide. This plan identifies a number of actions that could begin in the short term. And a lot of these actions are things that can be done with existing resources or relatively lower levels of investment that don't require fundraising. In the interest of time, I won't go through all of these, but I wanted to point out some general themes of the types of immediate actions that could be the first priorities. These are things like education, assistance to residents in shifting to cleaner or more energy efficient options, some actions from the town's perspective to address facilities and equipment to promote cleaner energy, promoting clean transportation options to residents, some initial tree planting and preservation on a more targeted basis, and then starting to plan, as Brian mentioned, for future flooding and stormwater management needs. Go to the next slide. A few other things in terms of public health and safety. The focus there really is starting to address heat mitigation, particularly in the urban heat island areas, and then coming up with emergency response strategies. First step will be identifying a resilience hub for the town in the event of emergencies, and some processes for addressing and coordinating emergency response. And also there's opportunities for waste reduction efforts through education and smaller actions. And then last slide, or second to last, a major focus, I think, running through all of these actions is, as Eden has mentioned, is education and communications. And a real first step in that is translating the completed plan into Spanish and establishing a go-to place for climate-related information on the town's website. And we're calling this a climate action hub. And this will also, a key step will also be setting up a system and process for implementing the plan and monitoring progress. And also maintaining or updating the town's environmental certifications and designations. And a great first goal is achieving silver certification from Sustainable Maryland. Last slide. And finally, to summarize, these are our next steps. We're going to take comments back from you and also those we've received from the advisory committee and other stakeholders in this process. We'll start revising the document, and then we'll turn it over to MNCPPC, who will be in charge of finalizing the document and then publishing the final plan. And then implementation, which we know has already begun in some respects, will continue. And with that, I will turn it back to you for any comments, feedback, questions. We've got some time for discussion. And thank you very much for your time and including us in this process.
Great, Eric. Thank you. Thank you. And the rest of your team. Excellent. Thank you so much. I want to jump in with the questions. I see that Brandy has asked a question in the chat, but perhaps we can coax her to paraphrase that question live so that we can all have the benefit of hearing the nuances associated with it. Brandy, can you ask your question for our panelists, for lack of a better
threw
term?
it in there so I wouldn't forget. I was just curious, Eden, thank you so much for going over the recommendation section. I know that you mentioned there's like 160 plus actions in there. I was wondering, for the final adoption of the climate action plan, are you recommending that Brentwood keep all 160 plus actions, or that they curate them to like a smaller number for the town's cap?
That's a good question, and that's one we've grappled with. I think we've erred on. I mean, we've done some curating and tried to include those that we think are most relevant to the town, and we totally recognize that a smaller town such as Brentwood will need to pick and choose what you undertake, just given resources and staff capacity. But we have erred to some extent on inclusion, and we're hoping we could get some feedback on what you see as your priorities, and really that could be targeted as like these are what must happen in the next several years, and then looking forward. One thing we've discussed is potentially including a larger set of actions, but also identifying the key priorities as part of each section of the plan, and that's something that we could certainly do in the next iteration of the document. But I think we would definitely appreciate guidance on what you feel is most important for the town, and if we need to pare back if some things do not seem achievable or realistic and will cause more angst for not getting to them than value in really advancing climate action, then we can certainly do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. I think guidance on how you would recommend prioritization would be helpful to help decide what should stay in and what might be better suited to be left for another time. But this is great. Thank you.
And I will note that there are a lot of these actions can be grouped. They're discrete actions, as Eden mentioned, and many of them are like a package of actions, and could be combined to be more manageable.
Great. Great. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Brandy, for the question. Let's move to Dory now. I think Dory has a question or comment.
Yeah, thanks so much. So Dory Estrada, I'm on the sustainability committee with the town. I just had two questions related to stormwater. One, and pardon me if this is listed in the recommendations and maybe I didn't see it, but are there specific, like, is there a prioritized list of sites? Like, I'm talking like physical addresses in the town, intersections and the like, that are being prioritized for stormwater infrastructure improvement? And two, is are there any existing infrastructure projects on the docket for Prince George's County in the town that would kind of be a bridge to the needs that were identified? Just knowing how expensive things like installing new inlets are, and how that's just a really big, a big project for the town to take on.
Thanks, Dory. The short to number one is that yes, there are undersized pipes identified within both the Charles P. Johnson study and the climate action plan that do point at specific locations. They don't recommend a remedy action, right? That would be a next step, but like whether it is appropriate to upsize the pipe or whether it's appropriate to have a tandem pipe or whether it's appropriate to hold back water, that would be a next step iteration of studying what the remedy action would be. But the locations of undersized or constrained portions of the drainage network certainly have physical locations assigned to them. So it's sort of a yes, but I think the next leading question would be what to do about it. It's getting there, right? But that would take some more study. And no, to part number two, an overlay of proposed PG County projects with those has not been done.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. And yeah, thank you for all your work on this. I think it's very comprehensive.
Great. Thank you, Dory, and thank you, Brian. Any other questions from guests or mayor and council? If not, while you're thinking about it, I'll go ahead and throw in one really quick. I wonder if, so in your plan, I kind of like how you use the dollar signs to talk about the scale of costs associated with these. Two things I would just ask that you might consider in your next iteration. One, possible sources of funding. And number two, I wonder if you give some thought to adding some column, some graphic that would give us an idea of the scale of what the greenhouse gas benefits might be for a particular action. Maybe something similar to how you did the dollar signs, low, medium, or high, to let folks prioritize from a CO2 methane perspective what they could focus on.
Yeah, I think those are both good suggestions. The possible sources of funding to address the elephant in the room is that's a moving target right now to some extent, and it's evolving as we speak. We can certainly suggest funding possibilities that we're aware of, either as a general list in the implementation section or sort of where appropriate given particular actions. So that's certainly something we can look at, what kind of guidance we can offer. And then as far as the graphic showing the scale of benefits from certain actions, that's also something we can look at. Seeing that in other climate action plans where it may be just showing where you would get more bang for the buck, so to speak.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Super.
Yeah. So we can take a look at that and figure out what we can show for those. Some of them I would say are intangibles, and that's a big theme of this plan in terms of communication and education, really kind of bringing the whole town and all residents forward with this effort of climate action. And so that's something that, you know, the payoff may be down the road, but it's very important to start with some of that.
Great, thank you. I probably shouldn't put anybody in the spot, but I will. Jess, I saw that you just put your video on, and I know that you had some comments. Do you wish to propose a question now or a comment?
So I did send a document to council with my comments on this document. Have those already gone to RHI?
We have not seen them yet, but we know that they're being compiled.
Okay.
So
I don't need to reiterate stuff that I'm already gonna send over. So nope, that's okay.
I think it would be helpful if I might jump in, Jess, for you to share it here as it's recorded for the general public. If you wanted to just summarize a couple of your thoughts, that would be great. I was going to do it if you weren't going to hop off of mute. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try and make it quick. The parts of the plan that I thought were really great is thank you for describing your process so much. I think that's really helpful. Some of the recommendations I was excited by, and some of them felt too general to me to be very helpful, or things that may be outside of the scope of like the power of what the town of Brentwood could do. And so I would love to see a document that really focused on what does this jurisdiction actually have control over, and like what are truly actionable items. It's an action plan that we can do instead of like coordinate with the county on, but you know, like that's something that I would really like to see. I thought your work around the stormwater stuff and flooding was really excellent. But I thought there was a pretty big lack in the transportation section. Like, something as a resident that I've really noticed is a mom who's pushed a stroller a lot is we don't really have usable sidewalks. So if we're trying to get people out of single occupancy vehicles, or even just like allow people to walk and feel safe or bike and feel safe, we have to have, you know, sidewalks that don't have telephone poles in them. But again, that might not be something that the town of Brentwood has control over. I'm not sure. But those are the things that I can think of for now. I'll go ahead and flag a couple of items that, to me, I would love to see at the top of the list, and one that sort of fill a lot of categories in terms of climate resiliency, equity, stuff like that. Bartlett Park is this amazing gathering space for our community, but a couple, like the soccer field is like not super usable because it is either flooded or completely dry and dirty, or like dirt, like just dirt. And the splash pad could be just way better, and it could recycle water instead of running constantly in the summer. But we use it so much. Everyone in the community uses those spaces and we love them. And if that could be prioritized in the recommendations, that would be incredible. I also know, I'm not sure if Eliza is on the call, but other municipalities in the area are doing compost pickup, and that would really help with the food waste. Lauren, maybe you know more details, but there's a company that's doing compost pickup, and maybe Brentwood could piggyback onto that. Anyway, I took up too much time. Thank you for letting me share my thoughts.
Thanks for these thoughts. We'll definitely consider them.
Great. Thank you, Jess. Honorable Rauch, would you like to make some further comments? You've been a big mover of the process.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Burgess. I just would like to take a moment to thank everybody who was involved in any aspect of this, which is most everybody on this meeting right now, and a lot of people who were unable to make it. I know that this started with, I believe, Councilmember Marcus Monroe, former Councilmember Marcus Monroe, handfuls of years ago when he joined the council, when he was elected. He had an ambitious dream to have a climate action plan. And so I'm just glad that, you know, through his vision and some efforts of folks during the last couple of years, and this particular council and mayor and town administrator, to see that you all are here and to see that you're interested in carrying this forward, and that it means so much to the community and it will literally save lives, is just something that we all in this community need to be thankful for. So I don't have any suggestions or recommendations. I think those have been shared by others, but I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you. With that, I'll just say a quick thank you to everyone who showed up, including our presenters and our community and our fellow council people. But one last call for any questions or comments.
I'm sorry, I have one other comment since I realize there's a few council folks on this. I think I love what was just said, like this is an action plan. And I do think that the folks who have been drafting this process have really done due diligence to try to lay the groundwork for that. I just want to implore the town that plans like this are not meant to sit on the shelf. They really need almost a full-time steward or champion to carry them out. I know that funding has been brought up many times. It's laid out clear in the document itself, but if the town can do anything to fund a staff person to carry this work forward, I think that is of vital importance to actually see these recommendations come to life. So just wanted to give 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Dory. Thank you. I'm sure they all heard. Yeah. All right. As we're coming to a close, a quick comment for the residents. This is just we have a official work session meeting starting at 7 o'clock. If anybody wants to piggyback and join us for that meeting as well. Otherwise, I'm going to actually ask for a quick round of applause for our presenters. They did a great job, really nice job. And with that, let's be careful out there. Take care, folks.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.